Such red carpet treatment. Good morning, members of TEDxUniversity, Ms. Elizabeth Lee, my fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure and pressure to have been invited to come to speak on such an important occasion as this, where you are connecting the disconnected. Have I got it right? No, it's not there. Okay. More passionately and interesting to me is my work in the theater as a director and playwright. I've done many things on the stage, but these two things are very important to me. As a director, you are always in touch with a group of people, the actors and the people backstage, and working with them to bring something to fruition, the play. And that takes a lot of teamwork, a lot of understanding. And people ask me, what is it that makes a person a director? So what I tell them is that basically a director must have empathy. You must have empathy with people. You must feel like what the actor is feeling, the struggles of the actor. You don't jump on them and say, you cannot do this, you should do that, or whatever it is, but you feel their struggle and work with them. And together, you reach some kind of a goal. And that takes a lot of patience, very often stubbornness, qualities like that to get you through a project. Because every project on stage is a huge project. Because when you do it on stage, you bring it for other people to see what you do as well. So it is teamwork that goes on that's very important. Then, as a director, they say, don't you get angry, don't you throw shoes at other people, as I have once thrown a shoe at one of my actors in the hall for distracting, and that story went out that I was a very fierce director. But I had made sure that the shoe would miss him. But the story goes on. And then you become a legend in that way. And as a director, I've also come across many people who want to be actors and actresses. Not very many people make the grade as a good actress. The problem is that they go on stage and they act. That is the whole irony of it. When you go on stage to act, then you become a very poor actor. But if you don't act at all, then you should not be on stage. Because nobody is interested in seeing you on stage. Okay, so there's a lot of irony in wanting to go on stage for anybody. Now, I have directed recently, last year, for Shakespeare's 400th 400th anniversary of his demise. And I did Macbeth, of which I was asked to talk about Macbeth, because I did it in the Chinese opera costume and with makeup, but in the original Shakespeare text without changing any words. So I had a lot of interesting reactions. Some said, Mr. Chin, in doing this play, how is it that you are going to make it convincing when the play is about Scottish people? And I said, in any case, the English people don't speak Scottish at all. Then I had one SMS to me saying, Mr. Chin, now I know why the Scottish have been colonized by the Chinese before. And that what they wanted to say was that it was quite all right to do the play in this kind of a fashion. Now, how did this come about? It was not overnight. It took some time to think about it. I had studied Macbeth in school. I taught the play a number of times, and I also directed it a number of times, 2 times before I did this. And the 2 times were all different from this. The first time I did was in unisex costume of brilliant colors. The next one I did also was in unisex costume, but all white, with paint sprayed on the clothes. And this time round with Chinese opera costumes. Now, I may not have been the first person to think about putting Shakespeare in the Chinese opera costume. Some people who have done Shakespeare in the East, like the eminent, well-known Kurosawa of Japan, he had done a rendering of Macbeth in his film, The Throne of Blood. But he reinterpreted the play in terms of the Japanese background. While I thought I saw the film, while I thought the film had very interesting photographic shots of some scenes, but unfortunately, the adaptation of it, the storyline was very weak, especially the character of Lady Macbeth. If you have a chance, do get that film and see it. I'm sure you can get it through some CDs or something like that. And then a Chinese director in Taiwan also did that play, putting it into one of the eras of Chinese dynasties, and did the play with Chinese operas. But he rewrote the play as well. So they were not in Shakespearean language. But it was very odd for many people to think that Shakespeare and Chinese opera could get together. For me, I had been very lucky in that when I was in school, we had a series of principals who were interested in the theater, who acted as well as directed the plays. And I was very fortunate to be in that kind of a situation. And when I went back to the school to teach after my studies in University of Malaysia, I went full-time into doing plays there. And in doing those plays, I had quite a free hand to interpret things. And it gave me great excitement to be doing Macbeth on the stage. But then I was thinking of Macbeth in a different way, in a very traditional manner, interpreting the character in a very traditional way, in that he had a conscience, and then he was tempted and fell into evil ways, and had a very pushy wife, ambitious wife, who pushed him into that direction. That is a traditional idea and understanding of Macbeth. When I taught it in that way, but in the number of times I taught it, I began to think differently, and sometimes I voice it out loudly to my students that, last time when I taught it, I didn't think it in that way. But luckily, the students did well in their examinations. And it just shows that when you examine a piece of written work, you take time to enter into it. And you also, I suppose, grow with your understanding of life as you meet life. And you begin to see the complexities of life more. And that is what makes reading of fine literature so exciting. There is never a moment of dullness in exploring a piece of work. And then I came to this situation last year, mainly because I had thought about Chinese opera, for I am a dilettante in Chinese opera. I enjoy seeing Chinese opera, but I know no Cantonese to understand it, any Chinese language for that matter, because I'm a banana. I got these costumes. I had to rent them. It cost quite a bomb to rent them. and was lucky to meet this lady who owns a Cantonese opera troupe, and she was able to supply all the costumes. And why the Chinese costumes? For one, it was my interest in Chinese theater, and to try to put Shakespeare and Chinese theater together, because these two theaters, Shakespeare and Chinese theater, are very, very old theaters with very strong traditions, and they have things in common. The most common thing about their theater is that you must use your imagination. As Shakespeare in his play, Henry V, he says, "On your imaginary forces work." That means you as an audience must work very hard to create the play as well. It is not the actor giving you everything, the scene, and all that for you. If he says the moon is shining, you have to imagine that the moon is there. Your moon. Whether it's a blue moon or a red moon, it doesn't matter. All right, but it's your moon, not the director's moon in that way. If you are on a ship, it is your ship, not the director's ship or the stage designer's ship in that kind of manner. So it's the imagination that is most important. And I thought that these two theaters could meet. And when I did it, of course, there was a lot of surprises. Some said, "Oh, are you sure the Scottish thing will work with the Chinese costumes? Would Shakespeare be done in the Chinese sing-song way, where it's all very nasal when you speak, like that?" So I would have to look at that and say, "Look, if you speak like that, Shakespeare will roll in his grave." Of course, we are going to do it Shakespearean language. And this worked. For many people, some can say, "Oh, it worked. And that, I suppose, took them by surprise. But for me, it was no surprise, because the theater, Western or Eastern, doesn't come into a conflict at all. Because sometimes when we see a play, what happens is that we have a certain fixed idea of how a play should be done. And because we have that fixed idea, we are not allowing ourselves to open up our minds. We need to open up our minds in everything that we do, so that you won't live in your little box, or as the Malay proverb will say, "Katak di bawah tempurung." All right? You don't want to live like the frog under a coconut shell. Then your life will be very narrow and not so exciting in that way. I use the Chinese opera costumes mainly because the Chinese opera costumes at once tell you the character, the status of the character. Like if you are king, you will wear the crown and clothes of a king. This is not a king, this is only a general, without his full regalia. This is when he's the king. When he's the king, you will have the hat that he wears to show that he's the king, and his costume will always have the dragon symbol. And at once you know that this is a king. And his colors will be either red or yellow, in that way. Then, this is other lesser characters in the play, this young boy and the mother. And this is the full regalia of the general. If you look at the costume, it's quite stunning. And then the flags that you see behind, all right, they are symbolic of the soldiers that he carries. You don't have to have 1,000 people on stage. You imagine that he's moving with 1,000 people behind him in that way. So the costumes tell a story. Or this is another desire of mine, to see the three witches played by one person. In any production of Macbeth, there will be the three witches who will appear. But what I did was to have one person play the three witches with two hand puppets. And her voice would be different from each of the witch in that way. And many people, of course, thought that it was very mesmerizing and stunning. They thought that she was a ventriloquist, and she's not a ventriloquist. She is the actress who plays Emily of Emerald Hill. I'll talk about Emily of Emerald Hill in a little while. This is another of the generals there in the play. And you look at the costumes, the details of the costumes and the embroidery, they are all very exquisite in that fashion. You wouldn't think that they have gone to battle in this kind of costumes, all right? Okay, I will go on to talk about Emily of Emerald Hill a little bit. Emily of Emerald Hill was a play that was written in 1983 in Singapore by Stella Korn. At that point, nobody wanted to do the play because the play was too long, it was of one person, and it was redundant in some places. The play happened to come to me through a mutual friend, and I looked at it, I said, wow, this play, the whole world must see. Then I went on to do it with Ms. Liao Pui Tin, who's a member of the staff in Sunway, when in her young days. And my younger days, we did it, and it turned out to be an overnight success. And after that, with that performance, it went on to be a success internationally, so much so that the play is being used in many of the Singapore secondary schools and the universities in Singapore in the study of literature. And that is how it went on, from a little ripple to a wave, internationally. And the people who have acted in it have always found it very exciting, all right? And then very briefly, I'll tell you about another notorious experience I had with being a director. I wrote the play Refugee Images. And in this play, when it was first done, it was banned 2 days before opening, mainly because it was said to be too political, would be an embarrassment to the country, and that there may be riots in the theater, things like that. I felt like standing up and giving the person a lecture as though I would lecture a student. But I thought discretion was the better part of valor. And this play finally got done about nearly 20 years later. The full play. At that time when I did it, they said, oh, no problem at all. You can talk to me about after this later. I thought that I will leave this place much earlier because I have some things to do. But if you want to ask me questions later, I will stay and talk about all these interesting things that you may not know about. Okay, these are some of the pictures from from Refugee Images. I had to change it to Morning in Night because of some authorities. Okay, thank you very much.